All right, well, we will start now.
Okay.
We are on Under Oath podcast. Our guest today is Gerry McMahon. Welcome, Gerry.
The Peanut Gallery.
We're here at the Lomurro Law Firm, and today we're going to talk about what it's like to be a lawyer in a Mafia case. Specifically, you were involved in the first case where a former Mafia boss turned state's witness. The case is really famous for two reasons. That's one reason, and the other reason is that it involved one of the most famous heists in American history, the richest heist at the time on American soil. Over $5 million taken at an airport, JFK, right?
JFK,
Right.
although I must correct you a little bit, you're sort of mixing them up. Vinny Asaro was the guy with the JFK and the Lufthansa. Joe Massino, the mob boss, was a different case, but they both were roaming around Queens, and they were both Bonanno people.
Got it. And you had your hands in both of them?
I had my hands in both of them. Interestingly enough, the guy who was a defendant in the case where Joe Massino testified referred me Vinny Asaro.
Oh.
Vinny called him up. He says, I'm going to get arrested in a couple of days. That lawyer that you have, what's his name? Call him and tell him I'm going to be calling him. So my client calls me and he said, you're going to get a call from this guy. Oh, when the arrest came down, which was a few days later, he said, you're going to get a call from this guy. He says, but I want you to know, I'm not vouching for him. Get your money up front or don't get involved.
Is that a common theme when you deal with Mafia figures?
No, because these guys, this particular group, are pretty solid in terms of paying their bills, and one person would take care of another person and stuff like that. So he went out of his way to let me know that Asaro was a deadbeat.
Right.
So get your money up front. So I ended up doing the arraignment, and then there was an incredible blast of publicity that came from the arraignment. So years later, after I wasn't representing him, these news reporters are still saying his lawyer, Gerry McMahon, and stuff like that. And the poor lawyers that he had at the time were getting like no PR. But Vinny had no money. And I went to see him after the arraignment and at MDC. I told him the number. He says, okay, don't worry about it. This guy, my nephew, is going to give you 50. This guy's going to give me this.
Is it all cash all the time?
No. The feds, the way they are into your books, you cannot do it that way, especially on a high-profile case. Turns out Vinny was a deadbeat, and what was worse is that he had no friends that wanted to put up money for him, nephew or otherwise.
And this is for the JFK case?
This is for the JFK case.
Right. Which was featured in Goodfellas, that scene at
Yes.
the airport.
Yes.
A couple other movies made about it.
Yes. It's funny, Vinny was an interesting guy, not a very likable guy, even amongst his own brethren, but he had a big mouth, and he would overstate his participation in Lufthansa. The government made it much bigger than it was, and that ended up hurting him at trial because they were able to show that he was not what they claimed that he was doing and what he himself had claimed he was doing.
Right.
So he was doing a little BSing, and that sort of was unearthed at the trial.
So
Joe Massino was the boss.
Massino was the boss, and from the New York Post, I got this as a great headline. I want to ask you about it. It says, mob lawyer Gerald McMahon targets rats. And this is how they start the article, right? When wise guys have a rat problem, they don't call the exterminator. They dial defense lawyer Gerald McMahon. Gets better.
You would think I wrote that myself, but I did.
Gets better. And then, no one does a rat like I do, McMahon boasted to the Post. My specialty is cross-examining rats. I have good instincts.
Yes.
So in preparation for this interview, you sent me the transcript of your cross-examination of Joseph Massino, the boss who flipped. And I said to you before we started the interview, you have two ways you can learn about the Mafia. You can go read 5 Families, which is an 800-pound Bible on the Mafia, or you can read his trial transcript, which is just as good and gives you a real inside look into the operations. He spilled the beans entirely.
Yes, he did.
There was nothing. I mean, I was shocked about going, and really the prosecutor went through his whole operation with him, and you just poke the holes in the lies.
Yeah, they have to do that because the view of the prosecutors is that if you don't bring out the warts and the crimes on direct examination and you save it for the cross, then it looks like you were hiding it.
Right.
And so they want to bring it out. We're being very straightforward with you, the jury. We're telling you we're putting the guy on, but here's all his warts. So it's become sort of a ritual formality that they do that. And sometimes it saves them if you don't have a skilled cross-examiner. If he just starts to replow the same ground that the prosecutors did on direct,
Right.
and the jury says, well, yeah, we heard that, but now give us something different. So it's always my view that when I'm dealing with a rat, and the Mafia cases now are invariably rat-dominated.
Were they always that way, or
Yeah, I think so. I think so from the days of Joe Valachi and stuff like that. The technology, they're getting into it more now, the feds. But sometimes to bridge the gap, they need the rats, and they just can't help themselves. They make deals with some rats that no jury would buy. I mean, they're just, I don't know what they're thinking, but you can't sell this to a jury of 12 people.
Well, that's kind of Massino's deal.
Yes.
He has two. He has 2 life sentences for
Right.
numerous murders, and he gets time served.
Well, the time served comes later. They never tell that to the jury. The jury hears, the judge could give him life, life.
But you got
in
into
jail.
that. You said you could get time
Yes.
served.
Oh, yes.
So that picture was painted on your cross.
Yes. And the reality is that they almost always get time served. And what the prosecutor does is, so the game that they play is that they keep him in jail while he testifies, so the jury thinks, oh my God, he's being punished.
Right.
He's still in jail. And then as soon as he finishes testifying, they run in and make a bail application, and then 3 months later he gets sentenced to time served. That's the way it works. And sometimes if he's held pretrial too long, they even make the bail application before he testifies or after the
But
first.
then you can cross him on that.
Then you can cross him that he's already out on the street.
Right.
But they make, in Massino's case, for example, Joe Massino was a very talented guy and well-liked in the mob. Very well-liked, well-respected.
Now, he's the boss of the Bonino family.
Of the Bonanno family. My client at that trial was an alleged Genovese fellow. But he knew Massino very well, knew his wife. They knew each other's wives, and they liked each other quite a bit. But Massino did what he had to do, he felt. He was concerned that his wife, Josephine, would get indicted if he didn't become a rat.
Right.
He was concerned that they would lose everything, including the house that they lived in. So after he went to trial, he gets convicted, he's looking at life, then he decides, I guess it's time to sign up with Team America. So at that point,
Is that what they call it?
that's what they call it. And the part of the deal was that his wife got to keep the house,
Right.
worth $1 million maybe, and she got to keep rental properties that spun off income of $300 a year.
Right. So they're doing okay.
They were doing okay. They're really doing okay. And what was the kicker for the jury was that he forfeited $10 million to the government.
Right.
Of the $10 million, $3 million was in cash, $7 million was in gold bars. So he's in jail, and I said, well, how did you, so juries love little details. So I spent half an hour on how you got and who got $10 million from your house to the U.S. Attorney's Office, what kind of a container, how many people carried it, did they plop it down on a desk of some prosecutor somewhere, and so, to carry $7 million in gold bars is not a small thing.
Right.
But they literally, the wife and must maybe a friend, carried the money from his house to the U.S. Attorney's Office.
Big old boxes?
No, bags. They were bags. So I said to Joe, Joe, I know, but that's 10 you gave the government. What about the 95 that you had stored in your house? Oh, I didn't have 95 more in the house. And as it turns out, that for the years that he had been in custody, and then the time that he was a rat, and while he and his lawyers are working out this deal, and here's $10 million, the feds never searched his house to find out how many tens of millions were there.
They just took their 10 and said that.
They took their 10 and that's enough. And this was a guy that was major into the narcotics trafficking, Canada and elsewhere. So the jury very credibly believed that, yes, he gave 10, and that's probably a third, a half, a quarter of what he had. So you got a guy, millions and millions of dollars. His wife gets $1 million house. Property's spinning off $300,000. He's going to get a good sentence down the road. And my defendant, my poor schnook, who I created the image of to the best that I could.
Was that what you played?
Yes.
Yeah.
He was driving an old Mercedes with a bumper held on by duct tape.
Poor guy.
So I said to the jury, bumper held on by duct tape, defendant, $10 million ashtray money to the government, gonna get a sweet deal. What's wrong with this picture? And
They ate it up?
They ate it up and they acquitted Mr. Romanello. But you know what? They should have. It's a disgrace that you would make that kind of a deal with that person to get this guy. And the jury said, no, we're not buying it. So what the government does now is they actually take the arguments that I've made in some of these cases, including that one, and then they bring motions in limine at any trials that I do. Don't allow McMahon to ask this question. You can't challenge the motive of the government. This is an improper question.
So they have a trial notebook just for you?
Just for me,
Wow.
and just to trot out. I just got a motion eliminated the other day. I'm about to start a Mafia trial on October 1. Don't let him ask this. Don't let him ask this. This is not good. So the rats that are going to testify on October 1 brutalized their girlfriends, wives, girlfriends, whatever.
During the same type of situation during cooperation?
Yes, and they want to keep that out. It doesn't go to credibility, and in the world of federal criminal jurisprudence, there are plenty of cases that say you cannot cross-examine a rat about beating up his girlfriend because it doesn't bear on veracity. You know what I'm saying? You know. So
Well,
that's what you do.
You won that motion in this case.
Yes.
There was 2 rats who were not allowed to testify.
The government opted to pull them back because they didn't want the jury to hear. Juries, as much as they can deal with, the gold bars, although they didn't know how much it would go on, they don't want to have the case of them beating up their wives and threatening to kill the wives' boyfriends and stuff like that.
But I think that's a good example of thinking lawyering behind the scenes that probably people wouldn't see. Is the newspapers say 2 mob witnesses, rats, couldn't testify, but they don't say what really happened. What happened was you made a motion, or the state made a motion to preclude you from cross-examining them.
And the judge denied it.
And the judge denied it. So you won that case on motion practice behind the scenes.
Yes, and to her credit, Judge Carol Ammon, she became the chief judge for a while, and then by virtue of age stepped down. But a really fine judge. And some judges in that courthouse are not quite so fine and would have perhaps ruled in a different fashion. But she thought it was, if he committed these crimes while he was a cooperator, even if it's theoretically not on veracity, she was not going to allow him to get on the stand and kept that hidden from the jury.
But you're saying that that's not the case anymore?
Well, it's hit and miss. Some judges, I had a case, BF Frank Guerra, where the judge was, beyond any doubt, the worst example of a judge the world has ever seen. It was funny. The trial started, this is Frank Guerra, he's a Colombo guy. He was charged with 2 murders, extortions, selling OxyContin, all sorts of things. And then the government made a motion in limine to bring in 3 additional murders that he wasn't charged with because they showed the enterprise, yada, yada, yada. So their enterprise letter was like 14 pages long. The crimes were 3 murders, many, many, many other crimes. So in my opposition to the judge, I said, Judge, 2 murders is enough. You can't bring it. I mean, it's a little overkill here. So the judge, Sandra Towns, God rest her soul, she allowed in all the murders, all the robberies, all the extortions, all the drug dealing, and kept out evidence of his doing gambling.
Oh.
So I stopped her. I said, Judge, don't do me any favors. You allowed everything else in. Stop. You're trying to look like you're fair and you're balancing. I don't want it. Let's leave the gambling in. So that's before the trial. So I knew this was not going to be a good trial.
How do you approach that when you have that type of
Well,
curveball?
one of the things, and I'm sure as lawyers you guys know that juries have a tendency to really like judges and look at them with,
Right.
They are Solomonic and wise and kind and fair, when many of them are just awful. And so I try not to get into a dragged out war with the judge, but it's a fight, an internal fight, let me tell you, because my default position is just confrontational, to put it mildly. So I knew that this was going to be a different. She had a reputation. She would max sentence, and she's a very mild-mannered woman, but she would just kill you with rulings, kill you with evidentiary rulings, and then kill you with
So how do
sentencing.
you win a jury over in that case?
Well, you try, and it worked out because I got virtually a clean sweep in that trial. Beat all the murders,
Except
all
for
the
gambling?
rackets here. No, except for him selling his pills. Now, these uncharged crimes, it's not like they just use it for sentencing, but you don't get a verdict on it because it's uncharged.
Right.
But so it was a 6-week trial, and I had no choice because at the very first, after opening statements, she calls the lawyers up to the bench, and she turns on a machine. This is the first time I saw that, the white noise machine. Have you seen
Oh,
that?
sure. Yeah,
Okay.
we have them all the time. Yeah.
Okay, I had never seen that before. This was the first judge I saw do that. And this is a woman who I charitably thought was as dumb as a rock.
Charitably.
So she's up there with her bench, and she flips the switch, and it's white noise, and I'm just like fixated by this toy that's up there on the bench. But she says, she leans over and she says to me, "Mr. McMahon, I have heard that you don't follow judges' instructions. I just want you to know you will follow my instructions or else." Now, this is as the government is about to call the first rat, Anthony Russo, Big Anthony, the key to the whole case. So this is what she calls me up and she tells me at the bench. I don't know, she thinks she's going to intimidate me. So I start bellowing at her. So much so that the marshals came from the back of the courtroom. I said to her, "What are you trying to do, intimidate me? What judges told you that I don't follow instructions? I've tried cases before, this judge, and I had no problems with them. So you tell me what judge?" And she was like, sitting there like that. So I knew that this was going to be a long slog of 5 or 6 weeks. And she was so quiet that I would bellow at her, and she would not respond. Now, some judges would, "McMahon, sit down or I'm going to lock you up," and they would lock you up. She was not at all confrontational. She would just kill you with rulings. So I played. I said, I have no choice but to play that she is being totally unfair,
Right.
and try and get the jury on my side.
And be loud about it.
Well, not necessarily, but be clear about
Clear
it.
about it.
And when I point my finger at a federal judge like that,
That's pretty loud.
they can see that sitting in the jury.
Yeah.
And they see my face getting red as I'm standing there looking at them and looking at her. And the long and the short of it was that by the end of the trial, oh my God, rarely do you put on a defense case in these mafia cases. I mean, it's just window dressing. But I actually called an FBI witness. On the last day of the trial, she allowed me to ask the FBI witness whether one of their proposed or putative rats had confessed to the murder that my guy was charged with. Total hearsay, totally out to lunch. In the normal course, I don't get this from 8 out of 10 judges.
Right.
She allowed it. And Nicole, the federal prosecutor said that she swears to this day that I had bullied her into submission, that she was a victim of Stockholm Syndrome.
Stop it.
No, she told me that she couldn't believe, I couldn't believe I got this ruling. And the jury acquitted my guy of all the murders, all the racketeering, all the extortions. In fact, when the verdict came out, I'll never forget this. The marshals bring it up to the judge. The judge looks at it, and I swear to God, for 120 seconds, she looked at the verdict sheet. and did nothing. Nothing. So I'm saying, wow, what is that? She hands the note to the marshals and says, take the jury out.
Wow.
I said, this is interesting. This is interesting. Says nothing, gets the note back, looks at it again for another couple of minutes, has said nothing to the lawyers. We're just packed courtroom, packed. She then says to the marshals, go get the jury. Oh, she had sent the jury out. Get the jury back. Says nothing to us. And then she reads the verdict, proceeds to read the verdict. Not guilty, not guilty, not guilty, not guilty. One of the predicate acts was selling the prescription OxyContin as part of the racketeering enterprise.
But not as an independent offense?
They also had it as a separate standalone offense. So he was acquitted of selling the oxycodone pills as part of the Colombo family, but convicted of selling the oxycodone pills.
Which is a better result.
Which is a better result. But so she's trying to figure out in her mind, small as it was, is this inconsistent, repugnant? What am I going to do with this thing? How did this crazy jury come up with this kind of a verdict?
Right.
But without telling anybody. But this is what's really. So we know none of this until they start reading all the verdicts. And so this was. I mean, the press had a field day. I mean, what a sweeping repudiation of the government, whatever. So, but that sometimes you get those judges. And
when was this? What years?
Guerra trial, I think, was 2011, something like that.
These are not that old.
No,
These cases are relatively recent.
Yeah. She died maybe a year ago.
The judge?
Towns.
Stockholm syndrome?
Stockholm? No, she died of another thing. But I'll tell you something. But I see that prosecutor she had many, many Mafia cases.
Do you play with the same players?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And she, to this day, nor can I believe, how could she ever make that ruling to allow an FBI agent to testify that a half a rat once said to him that he did the murder that my guy is charged with. And it's the last witness before summations and charge.
Right. The last one.
It had a huge impact on the jury because it sort of undercut the whole, they're making a mishmash. My guy did all these murders, and yet some other mobster said that he did that. And you don't bring that out. McMahon brings that out. And she had nobody to cross on it. It was just out of the blue. She allowed this. It was like, I was like, oh my God.
You get lucky once in a while.
You get lucky once in a while, but I will say this. If I had not bullied and battered her for 6 weeks, I think she did get worn down.
I don't know why this reminds me of the verdict where the judge there, if you're going to cross-examine or direct examine my witness, I wish you'd do a better job. That kind of reminds me of that.
Yes.
The rotten judge who just controls the case the wrong direction.
I just sat in on the Norman Seabrook trial. He's head of the Corrections Officers Union.
Yeah.
I have a tangential connection to that, so I had a bit of a rooting interest in the whole thing. So I watched it, a lot of it. Judge Hellerstein, Alvin Hellerstein, was the judge. Paul Scheckman was the attorney for Mr. Seabrook. And Hellerstein, who I have a Mafia trial on February 13th next year with, was all over Scheckman. He wouldn't let him finish his cross. He was interrupting him.
How do you treat that? Do you jump in?
It's difficult. Now, Towns, it was easier to bully her because she was stupid. Hellerstein, even though he's old, and part of his thing was, I think it is that he's old, but for some reason he didn't like Seabrook. So he would do things that were out to hurt him.
Right.
He liked the lawyer. Paul Scheckman is a very well-respected guy. But he didn't like Seabrook for some reason. So it was, and I told Paul, I said, you can't let this guy run roughshod over you. But his style is a little more gentle than mine and stuff like that. But it's hard, especially federal judges. They're just not used to being treated roughly.
I've had a case where the judge says, Mr. Lomurro, do you mind if I ask the witness a couple questions? What are you going to say? No, Judge, I'd really prefer you didn't do that, actually.
I know.
It's
hard.
Difficult. You can offend the jury, you can offend the judge.
Yes, especially if they have the nerve to do it in front of the jury.
They have no problem doing it in front of you.
Yes. At that point, you're stuck.
Right.
You got to let them go. And you got to wait till a recess or whatever, and you got to lay into them. But it's, it's interesting, though, that some judges, if they're good judges, when you talk to them after in a recess or a judge, you're hurting me here. There's no reason for it. You're hurting me. Good judges will think about it and look back on it and maybe say, yeah, maybe I shouldn't get that much involved in it and stuff like that. But if they were good judges to begin with, they wouldn't have done that.
Right.
They rarely do they want to get involved in the middle of it. But it's tough. It's very tough to deal with judges that, and now, especially when the government is aware of what the nature of your cross-examination is going to be. Oh, McMahon asked this, he asked this, he talks about this, the motives of the prosecutor, the motives of the agents. You can't question that. Can you imagine that you can't question the motive of the government in bringing a prosecution? There is a slew of federal cases saying you can't do that.
Even in closing, though.
Well, closing you could do a little bit more, but they will interrupt. They will try and interrupt you. And but there was also a Supreme Court case, Kyles versus Whitley. I think it was written by Souter. I forget who. But it was 7-2. It wasn't a 5-4 or anything. And they said you can question the motives of the prosecution.
It's appropriate.
Yeah. But that's a struggle. Every day it's a struggle. Federal court is very tough to win.
Let me ask you a client struggle question, because in my mind, I'm saying, what harder client can there be to manage than someone who's in the Mafia? Probably somebody who's not used to taking instruction from someone else who's not part of their organization like you. You're there to help them, but not necessarily for them to listen to you. Is that a challenge?
Yes, and it's one of the things that will send me closer to retirement. There's the old-fashioned Mafia, the Godfather 1 and 2 stylized.
Which is better of the two?
Clearly,
films?
and then you got the young thugs who run around Queens doing road rage things for Vinny Asaro and stuff like that.
Is that where it is now?
That's where it's now, by and large. So with the old timers, you set a fee, you don't chase them. They say it's going to be here, there it is, boom. They tell you one of these cases, the Polito case, which really was the one I said is the movie, should be a movie. This guy, Carmine Polito, and I had dinner with him the other night.
He's your client?
Was my client. And he was charged with a gangland murder in a social club in Brooklyn. Not being the shooter, but recruiting the shooters. And it was a poker game in the social club. And Michael Durso, who became a famous rat a year after this incident, after he got shot in the back of the head, and Tino Lombardo were two of the 5 people playing cards, and my client was playing, and his friend of his and another co-defendant. So people burst in the door, they shoot Michael Durso in the back of the head, he lives. They shoot Lombardo, he dies. So my client flees the neighborhood for 5 or 6 days afterwards, because when you whack halfway mobsters, there are ramifications on both ends of the law, which there were. So he comes back, and eventually he gets charged, and he goes to federal court, and he gets convicted. Paul Scheckman and I tried the case in front of Leo Glasser, in 2003. Gave us a horrible trial. Horrible. And to be frank, he was so bad. This is the former dean of Brooklyn Law School, a well-respected, a biblical fellow, Talmudic fellow, believes in biblical punishment, but a smart guy. But he did not like Mafia people, and he was very rough on us during this trial. Mm-hmm. So by the end of the trial, McMahon was trying my damnedest. I love the papal, lay that out there, to give the guy a stroke. He's another one of these guys. I would incite him. I would bait him. I would literally take a stick and point it at him. And he's a very formal fellow, wire-rimmed glasses, every inch the scholar and stuff like that. Doesn't raise his voice, but the veins in his neck would just pop. His face would turn red. And I was trying, not literally, but metaphorically, to cause a stroke and to end this trial midstream. It didn't happen. But he did make a couple of decisions that were bad near the end of the trial. And my client was convicted. Now, let's give you an idea between the old school and the new school. Now, what's interesting is my guy's charged with murder and native racketeering. And when he was arrested, he was eligible for the death penalty. The government opted not to seek it, but he was eligible. He was out on bail. And Leo Glasser allowed the bail. It's $3 million in houses or something that we put up. So for the entire trial, he's on bail.
Wow.
Jury comes in and says guilty. So he gets remanded, naturally enough. So mandatory life without parole. He stands up, turns to me, says, Gerry, shakes my hand, you did a hell of a job, thank you.
Wow.
Now, there aren't 5 people in the world
Right.
that would do that. Not 5. To make a long story short, we go up on the Second Circuit.
So he keeps you for the appeal.
Yeah, well, I actually brought in a guy. Sheckman did the appeal for the co-defendant,
Right.
and I brought in Dermot White to do the appeal for Polito.
But the fact that he didn't want to change counsel
No,
after
he was, because I did do a hell of a job. Let me tell you, I did a hell of a
we
job.
almost gave the guy a stroke.
I almost did, but I didn't. But my defense at the trial was that, A, my guy didn't do it, didn't set it up. But B, if he did, this wasn't a murder in aid of racketeering. This was just a straight-up murder. Because Durso and my guy hated each other. They were shooting at each other all the time. So it had nothing to do with racketeering.
Another neighbor.
So that was a subliminal but tangible defense. And we go to the Second Circuit, and we win. The Second Circuit rules not guilty, not a reversal.
What?
Acquittal. There was no evidence, not sufficient evidence, that the murder was in aid of racketeering.
Wow.
Doesn't come back for retrial. Acquittal.
So you don't have to retry that case.
Wait, that's federal. My
Brings
defense was it wasn't a murder in aid of racketeering, it was just a straight up murder. The Brooklyn DA,
Indict him for murder.
500 yards down the road, indicts him 6 months later for murder.
Wow.
Brings the same federal witnesses to testify in Brooklyn Supreme Court. So now my defense is different. It's not that it wasn't an aid of racketeering. We had nothing to do with it. Stone cold. Now my co-defendant, again represented by Sheckman, having sat through the first trial where all of the evidence was against my guy's the mobster, my guy's the this and that, and his guy was the Fortunato Brothers Bakery, very famous bakery in Brooklyn.
He's the shooter?
No, the shooter was the nephew of my guy. So it's the 2 guys that are on trial and were on 2 trials were Fortunato
Conspires.
and Polito. And they say that Fortunato was being hounded by Durso, and he went to Polito and says, can you do something about Durso? Polito supposedly gets his people, and they shoot Durso in the back of the head, and he lives to testify. Polito went, Durso went and had my guy shot in the front of the head, and to this day has a little thing up here, so that when you see him, ooh, what's that from? So anyway, so now we're in Brooklyn Supreme Court. I mean, you can't make these stuff up. This is why you don't retire.
And this is the guy you had dinner with the other night?
This is the other night. Because he owns a restaurant. He's back making pizza.
Feel like it's that Austin Powers where you keep looking at the mold, you just kind of keep...
It's up here. And the mugshot of this guy, you would seriously not wish to get into a thing with this guy. So we're in Brooklyn Supreme Court. Sheckman, for the co-defendant, the baker, says that the evidence against Polito is just too strong. I don't want to be at the same jury with him.
Severance?
No, he goes non-jury with the judge.
Wow.
And I go jury with Polito.
Wow.
So now, Sheckman, I told you, he is so tight with powerful people. Governor of New York, Mayor of New York. He was chief of the Criminal Division, U.S. Attorney's Office, Southern District. So he knows everybody. He made judges for years, so they all know him. And he's a smart guy, Oxford, Harvard, teaches evidence at Columbia, and a really nice guy. So he senses it. Now, I believe that the trial judge in Brooklyn Supreme Court, former chief of appeals, Brooklyn DA's office, I think in Paul's mind that he had it set up. Polito's going to get convicted by the jury, and then the next day when the judge renders his decision on the co-defendant, it'll be okay to acquit him because he's not a bad guy.
They already got their blood.
And they got their blood. So what happens?
Acquitted by the jury.
Acquittal by the jury.
Guilty by the judge.
6:30, the place is up for grabs. I mean, up for grabs. I go back to my office. Paul calls me.
He's really screwed this up for me.
I got a problem. I says, I know you got a problem. And the next day, the judge bangs this guy out.
Wow.
But it doesn't end there. It doesn't end there. So he goes in. My guy comes out.
This is the one you said could be a movie, right?
Yes,
Yeah,
this is
okay.
it.
I'll write
So
this
my
one
guy
down.
comes out of jail, having been in for, he doesn't get bail in state court. So he's in after he gets indicted for the state court murder. Fortunato gets bailed, but it's like $3 million bail, and he paid like $300,000 premium. But he gets out. So he's out for the whole trial, and my guy's in for the whole state court trial. And so bang, 6:30 Wednesday night, I think it is. The decedent's family's screaming, wailing, whoa. My family, oh, my guy's back out. So he's life without parole, acquittal, Second Circuit reversal, indicted, no bail, acquittal. The wife is like a yo-yo going back and forth. Very nice. Kids are really nice.
That's a wild ride.
It's a wild ride for her. Wow, what a wild ride that was. And so Fortunato goes in. Mandatory minimum, 15 to life. Judge gives him just the 15 to life. And Schechtman then goes for a second appeal now in state court. And in state court in New York, I don't know if they have it in New Jersey, you can appeal on the interest of justice. Nothing wrong with the trial, nothing wrong with the evidence. In the interest of justice, this conviction should not stand.
Is that an appealable way? No, we don't have that.
We don't have that.
The Garden State hasn't wised up on that yet.
Okay, so I'm following the appeal. I have an interest in it. I look at Paul's briefs. Paul is a brilliant appellate lawyer. I mean, just brilliant. Brief is tremendous. Polito did everything. My guy is a baker, a wonderful bakery. Polito did everything. Polito's Mafia. For Polito to be on the street and my guy to be in jail,
It's criminal.
It's criminal. He said, you got to overturn this conviction. So I go to the oral argument. Now, I'm thinking to myself, are you kidding me?
No shot.
Nothing. I go to the oral argument, Appellate Division, Brooklyn, 5 judges. One of the judges, the chief judge of the panel, is a complete hammer from upstate New York. I'm saying, oh my God, Paul's in trouble now. And they have questioning. It's about 10 minutes of questionings, and they were lobbing one softball after another to Schechtman. Just like, oh, how terrible. Oh. And then I check out the judges when I get back to my office, and I said, he put that judge on the bench, he put that judge on the bench, he put that judge on the bench. 3 weeks later, 5-0 reversal, interest of justice, out he comes. Wow. So he ended up doing about 3 years. My guy ended up doing about 3 years. And Cookie Durso walks around with a little 22 in the back of the noggin. Wow. Oh, and the capper on this thing. Cookie Durso was one of the most successful federal rats ever. I think he made 60 cases. He only lost 2.
Wow.
And
those were the 2.
I had 2 of them. Oh, he lost 3. Well, no, he won the first trial, loses the second trial on his own shooting, and I had him in another labor racketeering case, and there was an acquittal in that. But he was very good, very talented witness. So he has a particular hatred for Polito because he had him shot in the back of the head. So after Polito gets convicted in federal court and is in jail doing life without parole, Cookie says, this bum ain't ever coming out. He sends him postcards.
Oh, man.
To prison. How's life, Carmine? What's up? I'm enjoying it out here. Can you imagine the rat? That's how arrogant and cocky Cookie was. So needless to say, when it comes, I tell my guy, I hear about it. I said, get me the postcards. And so at the second trial, the state Supreme Court trial, out come the postcards.
Wow.
And I did Cookie really well. And the jury, very arrogant, really an arrogant guy. The feds again let him. He had $2 million on the street in loan shark money. So when he went in, they let him take the $2 million off the street. Gave him like $4,000 a month, and stuff like that. He was living the high life. And
so he stayed in the neighborhood, this type of guy? He doesn't care?
No, once he got out, but he's down in Florida,
right.
He and his wife. And but the arrogance to send postcards to mine. So, being the vindictive person that I am, when the conviction got reversed and he got out, I called an FBI agent. I said, do me a favor. Tell that bastard that my guy is on the street. And I hope he spends the next 30 years looking over his shoulder. So that was the Polito story. It was an incredible story. Now, and as I say, I had dinner with him the other night. Very nice guy. Very quiet. Now, he would not, during the entire trial, 2 trials, never a peep. Don't do this, don't do that,
Right.
Nothing. Hires the right lawyer, shuts up, and that was the end of the story. So that's those clients. Then you get the
tell
new
me
blood.
the opposite of that.
The opposite of that is, oh my God, I just finished this. Oh, it pains me because I just have no patience for these people, and they don't want to listen. They think and the jails are filled with jailhouse lawyers.
Sure.
And they're telling him what to do. Oh, why is McMahon doing that? Why is he doing that? Why isn't he got you out on bail? Why this and that? Why do you want to take that plea? And I'm trying to tell these people, shut the F up. Fire me. Hire somebody else. Don't bother me with your stupid questions. You're not going to testify at trial, so you are surplusage. From now until verdict, I don't want to hear from you. And that's my style.
Right.
And they, so some of them don't like that, especially if they're mini mobsters and they think, he can't talk to me like that.
Right.
So that's what I occasionally run into now.
So for a guy like Massino, when you're going into this, now that trial wasn't that long ago, right? When was that? 2010,
something like that.
By then you'd been in the game a while.
Yeah.
It's on here. It's on the transcript. 2012.
12, okay. So the years just fall away there. Yes.
Because in my mind, I'm saying to myself, okay, I'm going to trial, and the chief witness for the state is going to be the boss of a mafia family.
Right.
Okay. How do I prepare to cross-examine the boss of a mafia family? And am I to be expected that I should be intimidated?
I don't know about the latter. If they know anything at all about McMahon, they would not assume that would be the case.
But that's because you've been in the game for a long time.
Yeah, and I have a reputation.
Okay. Because a normal lawyer might say to themselves,
oh yeah.
Boy, I got my hands full here.
Yes. Cookie Durso was an intimidating guy because he was so good.
See, but this is the guy who's flipped and the most notorious rat. I just feel like he would be an easy cross.
No, because he's very slick. He has answers, good answers if you're not done right. Yeah,
it reminds me of a good medical expert.
Yes.
He's got a good answer to everything.
Yeah, and presented well.
Right.
With a little bit of earnestness and sincerity, and feigning drama and stuff like that. I mean, good.
I mean, that's the way Massino reads. He reads like very entertaining guy. I mean, he's having fun with you.
Massino was a charming guy.
He's a charming guy. When he goes through the history and his history with the Mafia,
right,
I was loving it.
You know what's interesting about Joe Massino? That's one of the things, for example, when I go out to dinner with some of these former clients, we swap war stories. I mean, it's like, so, it's just unbelievable. You sit at the table, I remember when this happened and this rat and stuff like that. And when I was starting out as a defense lawyer, I ended up at one point, not long after going into private practice, at David Breitbart's office. I was a young lawyer for Breitbart. He was Nicky Barnes' lawyer.
Oh, wow.
He made his name Nicky Barnes. Breitbart was a very talented cross-examiner, as good, present company excluded, as good as there is. And I had seen him do it. And I lost my train of thought. But one of the things about Breitbart is, and about cross-examination, you really cannot have a preset mind thought on how you're going to handle a particular guy. The key to me in cross-examining is to listen to what the guy is saying, because more often than not, if you think about what he's saying, sometimes the implications and the ramifications are totally unthought of by the witness or by his handler, the prosecutors, and yet there's nuggets of dynamite there.
Right. And you can miss them.
You can miss them easily. Absolutely missed them. You check down the list, he stole this, he did this, he robbed this, he did that, he lied here, he lied there. But you look, juries want some motivation. They want, so I'm trying to do one of two things. I'm trying to convince them that this is such a disgusting human being that no matter what, you got to throw him out. No matter what he says. Because no decent people would ever rely on him because he's so disgusting. That's one option. The other option is that he is such a sociopathic liar that you just can't believe anything out of his mouth.
See, I
so
like
you
that.
sort of
that
have to go.
seemed to me to be the way you went with Massino, which was you just pointed out every time he lied. From the instant he became a Mafia member and lied to become a member, which is part of the ritual, through all of his experience in the Mafia, where he lied continuously, and then all the times he lied as a witness in his own cases and in other cases.
What was interesting about Massino was that, see, not having encountered these people, I don't know how they're going to react to me.
Yeah.
Questioning.
He reacted pretty gently to you, I think.
He did.
Yeah.
Which sort of
Threw you off.
a little bit.
Yeah.
And my client had said they were good friends, and he didn't think he would go out of his way to hurt him, and he was right. So my purpose then with Messina, and lawyers can be, juries don't like lawyers taking advantage of witnesses, even if they're bad people a little bit. So you don't want to be a bigger bully than the guy that's on the stand. So I was a little bit gentle with him because, frankly, he was saying things that years later I still use some of his. When I contradict, they bring on an expert to testify in the Mafia structure, capo regime, boom, 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 and they have the rules. This guy says the rules are just total BS.
He does.
Total. So this is going to be an motion in limine that I file
For your next
week.
case.
For the next case.
Yeah.
But so he was giving me everything that I wanted, so I didn't have to attack him. But what I did do was I attacked the government. I said that the fact that you have made this deal without ever going into his house to see how many millions and tens of millions he has.
That's interesting.
Yes, and they
you were able to take shots at the investigation
oh
through
my
him.
God, and
Through him.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And my
And
entire
he did give it up. He gave it up on that.
and my entire summation was how inappropriate that my schnook with his bumper duct taped to the car.
Yeah.
You can't make that up.
Right.
When a jury, it's something tangible. In the state murder case on Polito, Brooklyn juries, they take the subway to the courthouse, Metro card, tokens.
And this guy got
This
$7 million in gold bars.
No, that's Durso. That's Messina. Durso got $3 million, $2 million off the street, living a life of luxury, fancy shoes. Michael Scarsdale, Leonardo, he had $2,500 shoes that he wore to court. I said, "Oh, Michael."
Did you point it out?
I did. But Durso, he's so arrogant. So what? I live in a nice house. I said, well, you understand that these people over here, they take $1.25 subway to this courthouse. And what are they going to think? If they don't pay their taxes. Oh, in the first trial, the federal trial of Durso, I went after him on, did you report his taxes? Of course he doesn't, and they don't allow it. So, and then the government said, well, you're going to amend your returns on redirect. They would say that.
To include your illegal money.
Yes, and stuff like that. Comes the second trial in state Supreme Court, like a year or two later, amended returns? No. And I said to the jury, are you kidding me? How about if you cheated on 20,000? They'd be all over you.
Yeah.
And this guy, no problem.
On illegal money.
And they lied. They tell the jury, well, he's going to amend the returns. And how bad are the prosecutors that they don't make the guy amend the returns? What do they think? I forget that I don't read my cross in the first trial? So and the Brooklyn jury, oh my God, you can't get away with that.
Is it all in Brooklyn?
Those were Brooklyn Supreme. No, Manhattan.
The Southern District of.
Southern District is Manhattan. Eastern District is Brooklyn. But I've had a lot of mafia cases in Brooklyn. They were very active, and
Let me ask
they're
you.
the best. I mean, the mafia cases.
Well, that's why I was wondering. I have a question. Who is more difficult to deal with, a mafia client or Axl Rose?
Axl was a what do they call it? Passive aggressive. When I saw him in the cell, there were like 20 cops just all over him, like mother hens and stuff like that.
For autographs or
Yeah,
breaking
the
them?
pictures, autographs, the whole
That's
thing.
great. That's
I
great.
mean, he's a big celebrity in Queens.
When was this? When was the Axl Rose stuff?
I don't know. My wife does dates for me. I don't do dates. But he was very quiet, very small and thin. His real name was Bill Bailey, from Indianapolis, Indiana. He left the house when he
Axl Rose sounds better for him. I think.
Axl Rose sounds better. His old man was a drunk and beat him up. So he was on his own since he was 16. Manic depressive, that's what he was. So he was hot and cold, which would fit with the stage thing and stuff like that.
So you see him first time, all the cops are getting autographs.
Oh my God, it was like, and so my job, he flew into Kennedy Airport from London. My job was to try and get him into the MTV limo as quickly as possible. And back in those days, it used to take 3 days to get arraigned in state court. You get arrested, you'd be there for a weekend. I mean,
Wow.
it was always awful.
Yeah.
But I got lucky. I got a lot of connections. The prosecutor in Queens County happened to be an Irish guy, so we swapped tribal handshakes and things like that. And he gets arrested at the airport at 8 o'clock Sunday morning, and I have him in the MTV limo at 6 p.m. that day,
He's out.
at night. It was. So, the Axl thing is he's giving a concert at Giants Stadium like a week or two later, 2 concerts. This was on a big tour. And so his people call my people. And Axl would like you and your wife and whoever to come to the concert on Saturday night at Giant Stadium. Very nice, okay. So I got a bunch of kids and my kids and their friends. I'm not an Axl Rose kind of guy, Guns N' Roses. So
I'm shocked.
Yeah, so I let them go. My kids.
You didn't even go?
I didn't go. Monday, I got a call from his people. Axl was disappointed. He didn't see you. He'd like you to come Wednesday night, and there's a party afterwards, and he would like you to come. I said, okay, when I get a command summoning like that. So Wednesday night, Giant Stadium. I've never been to one of these loud things. And the warm-up act is Metallica.
Oh, boy.
Oh, my God. And the noise was like incredible. And that's why, they're selling these the ear things. I've never heard noise as loud as this thing was. So there was a VIP section on the infield on the floor of the stadium. So I'm in there with Carole King and this and that and this and that. And Metallica doesn't take the stage till 10. Axl hits the stage at midnight. I have a suppression hearing in the Southern District at 10 a.m.
Oh.
And I have to go to the after party show
right.
backstage after the thing. That starts around 2:30. So I'm in there for like 5 minutes, and then my wife and I bail out of there, go home and sleep for about 2 hours in shower shade. But so Axl, that was a hoot. My kids loved it. Yeah. Interesting guy.
How does he come your way?
Another interesting thing. These are the connections. We were talking before about the connections that you make.
Right.
And all the mafia. All my mafia cases came from somebody put me into the Fulton Fish Market, and boom, everything went from there.
They were running the market?
Yeah, the mafia ran the market for it. And I somehow I got one case, and then it just went from there. But Axl came from a bail bondsman. A guy from Brooklyn who had moved down to Miami, who was one of the biggest bail bondsmen in the country. He did cartel people, El Chapo type people. He himself had 5 million signature authority. He didn't have to go to an insurance company or whatever. So he could write a bond for 5 million. He called me up. A Jewish guy from Brooklyn. We got along really well. And he says, how'd you like to be Axl Rose's lawyer? He's getting arrested, like Sonny or whatever. Oh, I said, all right, pretty cool. And that was it.
Yeah.
That was it.
That's how it can come.
You just never know where stuff's going to come from. But it's, now people just turned 71. I'm old enough to be your father's father, for crying out loud.
You go back with my dad. That's how.
Yes, we go
that's
back.
How you came in here. You go back with my dad.
And that's why, I don't do, not to be immodest or anything, but I don't go to outings and all of that. I don't do any of the networking stuff that he does, which you build a firm by. I'm happy to just be home, my grandson coaching my kids in Little League or whatever. So, Lomurro calls, Lomurro gets a response. But, I lost my train of thought. We get old. You lost the train of thought. Well, in terms of retiring, I enjoy it. I just so much enjoy it. I was really born to be a trial lawyer.
That's clear.
Yeah.
Now you had a little time on the stage, right?
I had time on the stage, and when I got back from Nam, I got dropped out of college, drafted. The draft board was after me. 2 years infantry Nam. Come back to college.
GI Bill?
Yes, they got money from that. My girlfriend was in the Marquette Players. She says, "Why don't you come and audition?" I did. So I spent the next 4 or 5 years doing theater. I was in a theater company with her in Milwaukee. But I was never as comfortable on the stage as I thought I might be in the courtroom. So after a period of time, I said,
Were you instantly comfortable in the courtroom?
yes.
Yeah.
I mean, I went to law school, and I loved it. I mean, I loved it. All my other classmates, oh my God, it's awful.
Worst 3 years of my life, but go
Oh
ahead.
my God, I loved it. I mean, I loved it. I go to Manhattan DA's office, first trial.
This is it.
Oh,
You knew it.
ground ball, an absolute ground ball, and so it just comes natural.
I think if you're a trial lawyer, you got it.
You are.
You got it.
There's no doubt, and you can't teach somebody. You know, you can make them serviceable, stuff like that. But the instincts to be a trial lawyer, you have it or you don't have it. There's just no question about that.
All right, my friend, I'm going to ask you 5 questions that we ask each of our guests on the show.
This is Michael K. We're going to do a wrap-up over here.
He's good. He knows it. That was the inspiration for this part of the show.
All
All right, so what case are you most proud of in your career and why?
I would say the Polito case. The ups and downs were extraordinary. He was a good guy. He is a good guy. So it's nice to have a really remarkable result for a guy that's nice. His wife is very nice. His kids were nice. They work at the restaurant, you know, waiters and stuff like that. Waitresses.
Restaurant's still open? This is in Brooklyn?
No, Long Island City.
Long Island?
So it was a nice family. He just happened to. He got involved in that whole thing because he was. Actually, you should take out names. Do we have the ability to?
I can do that, yeah.
Yes.
I can do
All
that.
right, I want his name out.
All right.
Because he's still around. So let's take his name out. So that was to get that federal conviction, appeal, reversal, state indictment. We go up to the New York State Court of Appeals claiming double jeopardy. We lose on that. Trial, co-defendant goes non-jury.
Wild ride.
Wild ride.
That's a wild ride.
Wild ride.
Let me ask you a question about that. Do you get one fee on that? Because that's a long way to go on one fee.
That's the other incredible thing. I mean, Lomurro would be embarrassed at the fee that I got for that. Embarrassed. But, you know, when you're in for a penny, you're in for a pound. I mean,
That's the truth.
That's.
Yeah, you can't predict it.
No, you can't. And I don't even remember what I got. I mean, it's not.
Made a great story.
Yeah, I mean,
and when we write the movie, it'll be a good fee on that.
That story and just an incredible. It was funny. And the kind of person that he is. One of my nephews played in the U.S. Open a couple of years ago, tennis player. So we had some time in between the day session and the night session. So my sister, my nephew, my wife, and a couple. We went to Long Island City, which isn't that far. We had dinner. We had a great meal at his restaurant. He was at the table.
That's cool.
It was tremendous. It was tremendous.
Yeah.
So he was fascinated by the tennis player and stuff. So that's my number one case.
That's your number one case.
Yeah.
All right. So if you could try a case with any lawyer besides Don Lomurro, alive or dead, who would it be? That's a good one, right?
It's a good one. There's a couple of guys who aren't names that I like and would enjoy trying cases with them. But it's difficult to, because when I try a case, you know, multi-defendant cases are problematic because the government puts people together and they want to have warfare break out, conflicting strategies and stuff like that.
It's fun because you're looking at this completely different than other people because you've been in that mafia room where there's multiple defendants. Other people might not have that experience, so you're saying it's difficult to pick
Very
somebody
difficult, yes.
who you're not really on the same team.
No, and you do want to have team players because it gets very, very dicey when you're not on the same team. So it's a question of being good, bringing something to the table in terms of, being able to cross-examine some of the rats. If you have to do 5 rats at a trial, the amount of 3,500 material is just like discs full and stuff. So it's nice to be able to divvy up and give 2 or 3 rats to somebody else and know that they're going to do a good job on it.
So let me rephrase that question. If you could divvy up a rat with one guy, who would it be?
You know, I can't. I would say Breitbart, except that I hate the guy.
That's okay. That's a good answer. That's a great answer.
I saw him cross-examine.
This was the Oxford and all that.
No, that's Sheckman.
That's Sheckman, who you do team up with often.
Yes.
Okay.
Sheckman's a brilliant.
Breitbart was the
lawyer.
dean.
No, Breitbart was the Nicky Barnes' lawyer.
Nicky Barnes, okay.
So when I was a young lawyer.
Did he do Mafia stuff in addition to the Nicky Barnes
he did.
stuff? He did.
Yes,
okay.
he did. He was the trial lawyer for Joe Massino,
Oh.
who got convicted and then flipped.
That's interesting.
Now,
So it all comes full circle.
it
for
all
you.
comes full circuit. Breitbart. So I'm a young guy going into Breitbart's office. He's a big name. So one of the things when you work for a guy like that, or he'd give you money and he'd give you cases. He gave me my first fish market case.
So he's in. He got your in.
See, he was the guy that
You can't hate him too
He
much.
was in the Hamptons on vacation on a Friday. They always like the feds like to arrest people on a Friday. The lawyers are in the Hamptons. So he's got McMahon to go do the arraignment of one of these fish market guys who did a $6.8 million Wells Fargo robbery. And then I ended up taking one of the defendants at the trial. Breitbart's an interesting story. Magnificent cross-examiner. Really good. And I went and watched him and learned. But the thing with David is that he had the largest ego in the human species. And after a period of time, Breitbart and McMahon can't be in the same room.
That's wild. But you'd still pick him.
As a guy who could cross, I would not pick him to be on my team,
Or
but
to
as a
get dinner
guy,
with.
as a
Right.
guy who. So we ended up. We did that Wells Fargo trial together. I was already ready to sprout my wings. This is '86. Trial is December of '86. Southern District at that time, the largest cash robbery in American history, $6.8 million, money not recovered. And we go to trial. Oh, what a trial this was! Oh my God! And 3 defendants. Breitbart has one. I have one, and Matty Mary has the third guy. And all 3 get acquitted of the stealing the money. Breitbart's client gets convicted of a 5-year conspiracy to steal the money. So that was a huge defeat for him.
Right.
So I walk Friday night, 6:30 is the verdict. The U.S. Attorney party is that Friday night. What a crusher for the U.S. Attorney. So I'm walking back to the office, 60 Hudson Street from the federal courthouse with Breitbart, December 18th, 1986. And we had been really close.
Right.
Really close. But it was getting
It was
less
over.
so. And we did not speak. And it was about a 15-minute walk. We just had this incredible verdict. You know, I got everything. He got mostly.
Almost everything.
But here he is. His guy got a little bit. We didn't speak then, and I haven't spoken to him since.
Wow.
And I would see him in jail, or I'd see him in a courthouse. It was unforgivable to him that he would lose a count or whatever to me. And we were close enough so that a couple of months earlier, he had sent me. We were close. When I say we were close, because he knew that I was good, so he would rely on me for stuff. So, and he had this office that makes Lomurro's office look like, you know, a shack, a little closet. It was a magnificent office. Oh, views are magnificent. David was, oh my God, what a head he had. But man, he could cross. And so, Aldous Huxley's grandson, I assume you know Aldous Huxley.
I don't.
Oh my God. Kind of Brave New World and those old.
You're
books.
dating yourself.
Okay, but they should still be reading it. Anyways, a famous writer, science fiction writer. His grandson comes into Breitbart, 11 o'clock one morning. He's girlfriend of the grandson. The grandson had just been arrested in Bangkok for trying to smuggle a plane load of hashish out of the country.
I know what that is.
And they needed somebody to go over and find him a lawyer and try and arrange bail for him. And David turns to me and he says, is your passport up to date? I said, yeah. He says, all right, well, you go tomorrow.
To Bangkok.
To Bangkok. I said to my wife, honey, I'm going to Bangkok. The next day I flew west, picked up the girlfriend or a family, somebody in California, kept going west and landed in Bangkok.
Jeez.
Met the kid. The Bangkok jail was much nicer than I thought it was going to be.
Really?
It was really nice. Garden, it was like a garden apartment with concrete wall, but nice, clean. The only odd kicker about it was that they don't feed you enough. They feed you this much rice a day. Now, for people that are from Thailand, it's okay. For big fat Americans or whatever, it ain't okay. So there's a cottage industry of food outside the prison, and you have to make arrangements to pay so that they send in food every day. So you have to find a lawyer and arrange the food. So I did, and I interviewed a bunch of lawyers, ended up with a woman lawyer who was really, I thought, really good. Otherwise I would have recommended her. So I hired her. She said that she thought in a short period of time she'd be able to get him bail with the expectation of sayonara.
Right.
She did. And so this was 3 or 4 days I was there, and then flew back the other way. So I circumnavigated the globe in 7 days. I came back to the office. Now, he had given me, the family comes in and gives him $75,000, I think, in a brown paper bag. That was the fee. So he gives me like 35 to go to Bangkok. And so I come back, and I didn't spend it all. I spent some of it, I saved some, being the thrifty kind of a guy that I am. So when I come back, I had done really well. I knew it. And he did get out like 6 months later. He got bail, and that was the end of that. And so Breitbart asked me, do I have any change for him? I said, you're a cheap bastard, you know that? I just made you $70,000 or something. I just went around the world and you gave me, I don't know. He didn't give me 40, he gave me like 10 or something for expenses.
In 7 days, you went around the world, got him $60,000.
And he wants change. I mean, that's the kind of guy that he was.
Right.
But man, he could cross. He was, and the thing about cross is you really, you have ideas of where you might go, but sometimes they say things that are just golden.
It's the places you never imagined.
Never imagined, yeah. And you got to listen and you got to think of the implications of what they said. So he's the best I ever saw.
Ready for the next one?
Yeah.
If you could what book has inspired you and what movie has inspired you? Doesn't have to be law related.
No. I just finished reading Team of Rivals coming back at a flight from Seattle.
Took me forever.
It did, but you know what? At the end of it, as I'm on the plane, I am absolutely crying.
Really?
Yes.
A cabinet of guys who don't like each other getting together and doing the right thing.
but no, more Lincoln. The tragedy of his life.
Yeah.
He was virtually not a real person. He was so incredible that he was, you would think, a supernatural person. I've never seen somebody who is demonstrably a human being have the qualities that he had, and then with his children dying and stuff like that, it was just unbelievable. And to win that, and then to get killed by the John Wilkes Booth, it's just like. So that's, and I just finished it not that long ago. So
it's a great book.
It's long, but it really
ferocious detail.
Ferocious detail.
Yeah.
I love the historical stuff. Alexander Hamilton, I'm a huge.
Yeah, I'm still getting my way through. That's the only book that's taking me as long as Team of Rivals.
Well,
it is taking me as long.
Okay.
But I want to see it before I want to finish it before I see the
Hamilton.
play.
Yeah.
Have you seen it?
No. The play?
Yeah.
No, I don't do modern versions of Alexander Hamilton.
So you haven't?
No.
Oh, yeah, well, I got it.
You got the implications.
I got it.
I like Hamilton in the original.
Movie?
Movies, movies that have. Did you ever see The Insider? Jesus, he and I are not on the same wavelength, this guy. The Insider is a movie starring Russell Crowe.
Is that when he takes down the tobacco industry?
Yes.
There you go. See?
Yeah.
I'm not so bad.
I've seen it maybe 50 times.
Really?
Yes. Now, the other one that rivals that is Syriana. I've seen that 50 times.
All right.
But what I like about
You got that, Michelle? Those are two movies we're going to watch now.
Yeah. The music in both, I have the soundtracks. The music is just magnificent. But I love the Insider. It's, you're taking on the government. You're taking on big corporation stuff. I like to take on big. I hate the government. I really do.
I couldn't tell.
They're becoming, and the thing is that I think like a prosecutor. I really do.
That's a good tool, good strategy tool.
Yes. And so if a judge gives me a fair trial and then bangs out my client, I don't have the slightest problem. None.
But give me a fair shake.
Just give me a fair shot, win or lose. Because, of course, he did the crime, so I got to complain about it? But that Russell Crowe, and it's a true story, that how CBS killed that story, and they're still doing it. So that's the only allure of Trump was that he hates the powers that be. So I hate that, and I'm a huge Julian Assange, Chelsea Manning fan.
So I guess you think they're patriots and not traitors.
Yes, I am anti-government because the government is becoming an absolute monolith that will choke this country to death. So I hate to be aligned with the moron that's in the White House in any fashion, but the government is a problem. And if in the time that I've been practicing criminal law, how far that they have come, the ability to ask a judge, don't let McMahon ask questions about this guy
that's a problem.
stabbing, beating up his wife, doing all of that, because it doesn't deal with veracity or this or that, and getting it 8 times out of 10. Juries should get the picture, yay or nay. You turn around and you say, yay, he's a bad guy, he beat up his wife,
Right.
but did he do this with this guy?
You're seeking the truth. That's what you're seeking.
By the rules.
By the rules. That's fine.
By the rules.
That's fine.
So don't say that, you get it, you can cross-examine. You can bring out the million crimes that my guy did and say it's part of the enterprise. Yeah. But the rats, I can't ask them anything because it doesn't deal with
level
veracity.
playing field.
I mean, that's awful. That's all. And the government is, the surveillance, the electronic, and all of that
Scary stuff.
is very scary stuff. And that's a concern to me. I'm concerned about what I leave my grandson.
Oh.
So that's, the EPA. I was just reading in the Times today. 60% of all the plastic that's ever been made
is in the ocean?
Is in the ocean or landfill. That's a lot of plastic.
Yeah.
You go out on the ocean on the cruises or whatever, you see islands,
Scary, that's scary stuff.
Very scary stuff. So that's not, and to me, the government is responsible. And none of the people down there do anything about it. So that's why a movie like The Insider, that in the corporate vein and stuff like that.
I will throw that on my list.
Okay.
All right.
That and Syriana really are worthwhile.
Last 2 questions. If you could tell a trial lawyer to do one thing every day, what should they do?
Do something different. One of the things that I think makes me a good trial lawyer, aside from instincts, is I do have a lot of different experiences.
I think that's true.
I've driven a cab in 5 states. I was in the infantry in Vietnam. I didn't get married till I was 30.
Be a Renaissance man.
If you can. That's why I love Hamilton and those people.
Yeah, sure.
I mean, Jefferson, Teddy Roosevelt. I was just talking to somebody about Teddy Roosevelt. The education that these people, they speak multiple languages. They were traveling around the world. I'm reading David McCullough's book on Americans in Paris. James Fenimore Cooper, these people, they just sashay over to Paris to learn things and write and paint. Charles Sumner, who ends up in the Lincoln book, Team of Rivals.
Yeah, sure.
In the 1830s, he's in Paris learning about law.
All those guys went over.
Oliver Wendell Holmes is over there in the 30s. So, if you want to be a good trial lawyer, have experience so that you can relate to juries, you can relate to witnesses, you can pull from the experiences. What's it like to be a shitter on the street, and riding a cab in the middle of the night?
You can connect with a jury.
Yeah, yeah.
What should a trial lawyer never do?
Do things by rote. It's just you can't be formulaic. Every witness has to be, there's different ways to approach all of the witnesses. One size does not fit all. And if the trials are boring and stuff, you got to do less trials. So if you do 1 trial a year, it's going to be hyper cool. And if you're doing 10 med-mal trials a year, just to pay this guy's rent over here, I mean, my God, you'd be pulling your hair out, like you want to kill yourself. So to me, the ideal world as I settle into my 71st year here is to do 2 Mafia trials a year.
For someone who can be selective, that sounds like a great plan.
Oh my God, how good is that going to be?
Yeah.
That's going to be good.
And that's going to be your plan.
That's my plan, and the other plan.
Because I tried to recruit him.
Yeah.
And said, "Why don't you come join Lomurro Law?"
Don and I we actually talked about it. I forget when, maybe at the basketball game.
Well, there's a lot. We got a lot of Seton Hall games to go to. We can talk about this more.
But I am just a homebody. Just now, it's with my grandson being out of town so much to traveling, and I'm a one horse pony.
So you're going to Washington this weekend?
Next Thursday.
He got Aaron Judge jerseys to wear as the Yankees go out to Seattle
on September.
But what he doesn't have is Aaron Judge.
I may not have Aaron Judge playing. So, but I do think that he's at all the games. Now, sometimes when you're
Oh yeah,
on the
you may,
DL,
yeah.
he may be there. We're going to be at the railing. Grandson and me, this old guy.
Something tells me
In
if anybody's gonna get
jerseys.
his, if anybody's gonna get his attention, it's gonna be
He may
you.
be meander along, but I love him. He's a tremendous player and a great personality. It seems like if he's only half as good as he appears to be, he is.
He seems like a traditional Yankee.
And a good guy. Well,
Yeah.
I wasn't ever a Jeter guy.
Well, and we have a very big difference of opinion.
No, I mean, Jeter's too perfect.
I have a difference with you too.
Really?
I'm with him.
Yeah, Jeter's too perfect. I like,
Do you like a little sinning?
a little sinning, but a little humanity. Now, Jeter was, from the first moment of his life, a magnificent player. He was groomed to be, and he was, a stud, an absolute stud.
But he's
So
not
there's-
6'6" like Judge.
No, he's not. He's not. But his Judge was never that kind of a prospect where he was
No, you're right.
everything.
He
and
barely made
everything.
it in.
So early on, Jeter developed the veneer. Doesn't talk. Doesn't you don't see any humanity in this guy. I like to see a little warts, little stuff like that. I like to see Roger Clemens throwing the ball at Mike Piazza's head and to see him fall. I like to see him take the jagged bat and throw it at him.
Right, I do want to see
And
that.
I want to see.
You're right. You're right.
That's what I want in my
It is
players.
fun. You are that guy too. All right. Well, thank you for coming on the show. You are a tremendous storyteller and trial lawyer, Gerry McMahon. Everybody.
My pleasure. My pleasure. What do you think, Lomurro?
It didn't
Now-
disappoint.
And we go back a long way.
Yeah.